Interactive Attivo Networks Deception-Based Threat Detection Myths and Realities webinar in collaboration with NH-ISAC. I'm Helena Cooley with Attivo Networks, and with me today I have Steve Hunter with NH-ISAC and Carolyn Crandall and Joseph Salazar, both with Attivo Networks. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Please listen by computer audio or dial-in. All lines are muted during this webinar. Use question panel to report any webinar difficulties or to ask questions. This webinar is being recorded, and the link to the webinar recording will be emailed to all of the attendees in a few days. Let me first introduce Steve Hunter. Steve is currently the Vice President of Marketing with NH-ISAC, whose core job function is to drive membership recruitment. He's launched new products for Fortune 100 pharmaceutical organizations, as well as bootstrapped his own award-winning marketing agency for 10 years. He's held international marketing leadership roles in medical education, healthcare economics, and healthcare IT. He's very passionate about his role in executing the mission of NH-ISAC. He is also a recovering Dallas Cowboys fan, living in the cold rolling hills of central Connecticut. Thank you, Steve, for joining us today. Steve?
I think we might have lost them.
Okay.
All right, so I think since we might have lost Steve's audio, that if we can get that sorted, we may invite him back at a different point in the session to go ahead and cover the things on NH-ISAC that he wanted to. I think a couple of the things he wanted to point out is that Attivo is a Navigator member for NH-ISAC, so we do actively participate in activities and events with the NH-ISAC group, and also are very supportive in sharing attack information and other data to strengthen everybody's overall defenses. So I do believe he wanted to make a shout out to everyone and encourage everybody to continue to share information. And if you're not already an active member of NH-ISAC, to consider joining the organization because it brings great value to its members.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. All right, everyone, now I'd like to introduce our TiVo speakers. Carolyn is a technology and marketing executive with over 25 years of experience in building new markets in security, networking, and storage industries. She has a demonstrated track record of successfully taking companies from pre-IPO through to multi-billion-dollar sales. Carolyn is recognized in the industry as a global marketing authority, and she is Attivo's Chief Marketing Officer. In addition, she's an active speaker on security trends in premier healthcare services organizations, and she's spoken in the last few years at NH-ISAC events, CISO forums, and other security industry events. Welcome, Carolyn, to the webinar.
Thank you.
Joining us today is also Joseph Salazar. Joseph is a veteran information security professional. He began his career in information technology in 1995 and transitioned into information security in 1997. He's a retired major from the Army Reserve, and with 22 years as a counterintelligence agent, military intelligence officer, and cybersecurity officer. He maintains CISSP, CEH, ENCE certifications. And at Attivo Networks, he's a technical marketing engineer focusing on deception technology. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Carolyn, over to you to start us off with the Attivo Networks deception-based threat detection myths and realities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helena. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with everybody on this topic today. Deception as a technology for threat detection is gaining strong momentum. We see a lot of active interest in the technology and a lot of people moving from the point of being curious over into looking at active evaluation. So we're hoping this session will help dispel some of the myths around deception technology. We have seen adoption of this, what we've classified as soaring. We had a fantastic 300% year-over-year growth on this technology. And in our conversations with Gartner as well, they have seen the interest in deception inquiries increase by 10x in the second half of the year. And so I think people are starting to realize that this is a valuable security control, and that it's no longer just something that people may use for research or just a little bit of discovery, but it is important and an efficient way to be able to detect your in-network threats. So with that, let's go on into the first myth. 100% security is achievable, and I bring this up not because it's a surprise, I think, to most people anymore, but there is a reality that I think is worth exploring. And if we come into this believing that no strategy is 100% foolproof, traditional security cannot contain ransomware because it exploits human elements, operational complexity of trying to integrate solutions from so many vendors can often lead an organization blindsided and unprepared. We also can see examples where big projects that are designed to close security gaps leave organizations exposed for extended periods of time and, again, continue to put them at risk as they try to build very detailed security programs and infrastructure. The other thing that we've seen is that no matter what you do, if you focus on lateral movement, the attackers move to the endpoint. If you focus on the endpoint, they're going to move to in-network lateral movement. And so it's really important to take a step back and look at not only the prevention infrastructure, but the detection and your ability to respond to these threats so that you can have the security defenses to protect your organization as the healthcare industry continues to try to digitize all of its information and be able to share information with its patients and community. So let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So how is healthcare faring overall? And again, I'm going to give you a little bit of setup, and we're going to get into the specifics around deception. But it was interesting as I was preparing for this session and looking at how healthcare fared in the third quarter of this year, and healthcare ended up being the #1 victim of publicly disclosed breaches and about 70% of overall incidents. And so the takeaway from that is that whatever is being done is not completely working to protect all organizations. And these are a mix of different IT and hacking events. Ransomware still continues to plague healthcare and is seen with an 89% increase, with predictions that it could quadruple by 2020. So again, as the attackers exploit the human element of things, they're just finding a way around the security controls. And sadly enough, data is showing that around 40% actually are paying up on the ransomware because they view it as their only option to be able to protect and preserve their data. The last point that I would bring into this is on average in 2017, although the industry is talking about 99 days, healthcare organizations were averaging around 55 days. So again, a little better than the industry average, but at the same time still providing the attackers an extended period of time in order to mount their attacks. So if we believe that breaches are still continuing to happen and that 100% secure infrastructure is not an option, then you have to start to look at a shift to detection as a critical security control. What I want to do now is bridge into why is this so hard? And as we know, threats are evolving. There's different types of attacks, attack vectors. Kits are being made more readily available. They're morphing at an unprecedented rate. And the attack surface is evolving. And whether you're looking at your endpoints, your network, your campus, your data center, your cloud environments, or just the explosion of IoT devices that are out there, it's creating a lot of new complexity and not having a single weak link, because that's all that the attacker needs to be able to get into the network. And the solution has to be able to fit for not only the malicious external threat actor, but also for insiders and suppliers and contractors that you may have on staff. The other thing that seems to be coming up a lot is the how well-funded some of the government-sponsored attackers are. And this is surfacing up more and more as a threat, a top concern or top threat of organizations that we're talking to. And if I dig a little bit more into, 2017 was talked about as the year of ransomware, and our prediction for 2018 around this is that cyber criminals are going to continue to aggressively target the hundreds of thousands of IoT security devices that are deployed in healthcare. They're pretty much ubiquitous, as you know, throughout the organization and have a standard presence in healthcare facilities, operating rooms, and in patient care networks. So going to be a huge target for the attackers, and many view these internet-enabled devices as the top vulnerability since they're not fully controlled by IT, lack resources and budget, and often come with security limitations. And so as we look at closing that detection gap in the healthcare environment, being able to protect medical devices is a critical concern, and something that, as we look at deception-based threat detection, we've gone through great care to be able to set up deception solutions in that environment. An example on that would be working with BD and getting the BotSync technology certified to work in their healthcare device environment. So again, more can be provided that by contacting BD or us if you'd like to find out more on that. Let's dig a little bit more into it. Healthcare brings with it some unique challenges and the attack surface that they have to protect. And we know that they're going to come in looking primarily for two reasons: to steal the medical records they contain or extort them for ransomware payment. And of course, medical records tend to be a target of choice as it's prized for identity theft and financial fraud. So there's been a lot of attention and care paid on protecting that, but also, as we mentioned now, medical devices should be coming up as a top concern. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting as we looked at the healthcare breaches that happened in November of this year is that mix that they came across healthcare providers, healthcare plans, business associates, and even a category of other, which turned out to be a law firm that suffered a ransomware attack and affected medical records. So it's a very complex environment as you look to secure financial information, patient records, clinical research, competitive market analysis, your employee personal identifiable information, and also your patient data. It's thought-provoking as you think about trying to get as close to 100% security as you can, where your crown jewels are, how well you can detect threats in these environments, and how well you can contain them and prevent them from resurfacing within your networks. So I think the net of all of this is that trying to achieve 100% secure environment within a medical or healthcare environment is very complicated, and that attackers can and will find ways to bypass security. So now what becomes the most efficient and effective way for detecting the threats within the network? Which leads me into myth number 2. That deception is not a critical security control. We hear this quite often that, well, it's nice to have this in-network detection, but in reality, we would say that it's not a nice to have. It is a critical security control because CISOs are facing enormous pressure to keep their organizations protected, and the attack surface is changing and morphing and coming up with new insidious methods and methodologies to launch their attacks. And what's still happening is whether you count it at 55 or 99 days, that the dwell time is too long, lateral movement detection is too hard, credential theft is bypassing other controls. We talked about the attackers exploiting human weakness, and as much training as you do, we're all human, right? So we're all going to have errors and click on the wrong thing or enrage it. And again, the attackers are getting more sophisticated in the way that they're hiding malware. So we're going to make mistakes and fall for these new tricks that they deploy on us. So this is why deception brings in a new approach, one that can be very effective in detecting those in-network threats early, and with a key focus on the word early and accurately. Building taller castles and moats is just not going to work. They're going to come in over, under, or already be on the inside of the network. And so taking a new approach that's not trying to catch them at the perimeter or rely on antivirus solutions to be able to detect them, but instead setting up very efficient and effective traps to be able to catch them as they try to do reconnaissance and approach their targeted assets or steal those credentials in order to penetrate the network. One of the unique things about deception is it's also not trying to replace any of your other current security controls. It's closing that detection gap. It's being built for all threat vectors so that it's not reliant on signatures or known attacks. It also plays a valuable role in improving the understanding of attacks. It's not just one thing to detect that you've got something in your network, but to be able to have the substantiated alerts to know what they're trying to do and where the infection is coming from with enough detailed information to be able to shut down the attack and also to threat hunt for it in other parts of the network. The other thing is that, a lot of people will ask, well, it's kind of a nice to have, but does it really work? And there are several Attivo customers that will talk about deception as their nerve center, the alert that they listen to most because it is a high fidelity alert. We don't generate the false positives because it is engagement based, and so if somebody touches deception, you know that there's a reason. It's not going to go off because we think something wrong is going on. Something wrong is going on, and that could either be getting scanned or pinged by someone or something that shouldn't be, or again, taking the credentials or bait that we've planted and attempting to use that. So one of the greatest validations of this is peer references, being able to look at it in a POC. Pen tests can also be very valuable in not only validating your security resiliency, but also in showing the value of deception. I'd like to cite just one healthcare provider. They bought TiVo about a year and a half ago, and they put in a limited deployment to see what would happen. And what happened over the course of that year is that they found 6 material incidents that they felt would have caused a breach that would have forced them to have to report, and this gave them the justification to move forward with a broader global deployment. And it's something that they like to tell the story to other people as well, because deception is not like a lot of other controls that it's going to ring every morning multiple times because it thinks something is going wrong. It will only go off when there is something going on, and it will go off early. And what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about how this compares to some of the other detection technologies that are out there.
Well, a lot of times when you are looking at controls, there are a few things you focus on. Detecting known, detecting unknown, and detecting unknown really comes to anomaly detection, detecting advanced threats for which there's no known signature. And so when you're trying to close that blind spot where you've got known versus an unknown, and you've got threats that have made it past your perimeter, which means they've already made it past your current defenses, you have several different choices in what to look for. So everyone usually starts with signature-based. They've got the firewall, IDS, you've got antivirus, you've got proxy blocking, and that's good for known threats. But the recent statistic I've read is that signature-based detection is about 40% effective. There are too many different ways to bypass existing signature-based controls. So then you move toward the next set, which is anomaly detection, whether it's network or endpoint, or behavioral detection. Now those things are very good at looking at behavior that deviates from a baseline to find anomalous activity, which could then be considered malicious or at least suspicious. Now these no signature detections work well if you have a good baseline. The problem is most companies don't have a good baseline. Their network activity changes on an hourly basis. To get a good network baseline, you have to record for a long time. So it takes a long time for you to gain that baseline before you can look for anomalies. And then you still have to worry about false positives if normal activity goes beyond that standard baseline. So then other technologies have been developed to sort of deal with that baseline anomaly detection issue or the no signature issue, right? So you've got SIMs that look at a whole bunch of different events, a whole bunch of different data from a lot of different sources and tries to correlate them together to come up with a way to detect bad, to detect something that's happening in your network that you can consider bad. Now, the problem with this is that this is all human-tuned, or in some senses there's some AI involved, but essentially you still have to tune the SIM, and you still have to decide what level of activity constitutes an event that you need to alert on for it to become an incident. So there's still a lot of manual intervention even when looking at a SIM which is supposed to correlate this stuff automatically. So then new technologies have come out where you have UEBA, user or entity behavioral analytics, and hunt teams. Now, UEBA is really good at finding things after they've been around a while. So generally, UEBA will find attackers and they'll identify events much later in a kill chain, much later in the attack activity. So with UEBA comes a lot of tuning. You have to, again, UEBA has to develop a baseline, and you have to tune it so that you understand what each and every single entity and user has for what's considered regular behavior, what's standard behavior, and then they'll alert on deviations from that standard baseline. So while there is a bit more analysis involved, there's a lot more AI and machine learning involved with that, there are still some issues with UEBA in that it takes a long time to learn to get good enough to make alerts. And then you have hunt teams. Now, hunt teams are really good. They're very efficient in terms of finding things if you have the manpower to man them. But therein lies the problem. Hunt teams take a lot of expertise in order for you to field a strong enough hunt team that can look for and find bad activity in your environment. The problem is there aren't a lot of experts in malware hunting that are available. There's a distinct manpower shortage that's been talked about for the past 2 years that's expected to get worse over the next 5. So hunt teams are very good at finding things, but it's hard to field a hunt team because there's not enough expertise available in the industry for you to field a capable and fully manned hunt team. Which brings us to deception, which is the next iteration of that, where you're stepping back from trying to find things the traditional way, where you're hunting. What you're doing with deception is you're setting traps that wait for engagement. Now, because the alerts that deception provides are based on engagement, there's very, very low chance of a false positive. Either the activity is a violation of security or it's a violation of policy. But in that way, the alerts are substantiated because of the way deception technology works, and it records everything that happens in the engagement environment. Any alert you get is going to have the data to back up why it was alerted on in the first place. Rather than having to correlate a lot of disparate events, everything is put together for you in that alert. Not only that, but setting traps doesn't take a lot of effort. When you're putting these sensors and these decoys out at the network and at the endpoint, it's very easy to set them and then leave them. So you're not actively having to manage your deception deployment. And then because if you think of the way decoys work, you'll understand that an attacker attacking a decoy is not attacking one of your production assets. So it's actually slowing down the tempo of the attack. You're feeding them misinformation, and you're slowing down the attack because they're attacking a system that has no production value for you and is in fact giving you intelligence on what the attacker is doing. Meanwhile, the attacker is wasting their time on the decoy, and they're not attacking a production asset. So you can now take the information and the intelligence that you gain from their attacks in the decoy to strengthen your environment. So in this way, deception, which is inherently efficient, also enables your security.
All right, so let's dig a little bit deeper now into the use cases that healthcare organizations are seeing with deception and why we're seeing such a heavy increase in adoption in deception technology in this industry. So first, one of the things that I continue to hear is lateral movement detection with a focus on efficiency. There's lots of different methods, as Joseph talked about, that can track lateral movement detection, but not as many that can pick up not only reconnaissance, but credential harvesting and slow the attack, as he talked about. The second is the credential theft-based attack. So by having both network and endpoint-based deception is we can detect endpoint and domain credential theft. Plus, there's some interesting things that Attivo has designed around providing attack path visibility so that you can see where you may have misconfigurations, exposed credentials, and what attack path an attacker would take towards getting towards your critical assets and successfully completing their mission. The other area is ransomware. So it's a very efficient way to be able to detect, analyze, especially if it's a polymorphic type of an attack, and then interaction that we provide to slow down the attack. And to explain that a little bit is that we feed it high interaction deception so that it stays busy encrypting inside of our deception server instead of moving on to the next system to infect. And what that does is it gives you the ability to invoke the automations to quarantine and basically isolate the infected system off the network before it has an opportunity to spread. So there's also some really interesting video and case studies we have on that from Attivo Research Labs. So definitely fill you in on more since this is obviously such an important attack vector. And the other one is the evolving attack surface. And a lot of times organizations are looking at it going, yes, I'm concerned about my user networks and protecting all the different types of data that we talked about before, but they also need to understand if I migrate to the cloud, if I'm working in remote office, branch office environment, if I have all of these specialized environment, it may be IoT, it could be point of sale, it could be other things, I don't want to have a different solution for each of these different environments. And so deception, because of the way that it operates as setting traps and lures and being engagement-based, creates a very highly scalable environment. Plus, there's a lot of care that Attivo has taken in being able to customize those events or those environments for authenticity so that the attacker is not able to identify and avoid them. And we'll talk a bit more about that a little bit further in the dialogue. The other one, which is an interesting use case, is around compliance, breach investigation, and M&A visibility. So another sector for us that's done surprisingly well is around the legal sector, both from law firms and also legal within organizations, as we help with compliance, forensics, pen testing to meet compliance requirements, and also the evaluation of latent threats, especially around M&A. Before you hook up another company's network or even with suppliers, you want to be able to understand if there's things that you're bringing into the network. Also, a lot of times once the acquisition is announced, both companies will get hit fairly aggressively as people try to discover and get into information from there. So again, deception can play a very valuable role in being able to detect those threats early and not at the point of exfiltration. The other thing is, as Joseph mentioned too, is the skills shortage and ability to respond to the incident. It's not only the detection, but the automated attack analysis, the forensic reporting, and the automations for incident response, which allow this technology to go in without requiring deeply skilled professionals or to add additional people to the team, even in large global deployments.
So as I was speaking about deception, I'm sure some people were thinking, well, isn't deception just a honeypot? Well, deception is a honeypot if you believe that a horse and buggy is the same thing as a Tesla Model S. Yes, the inherent technology is meant to do the same thing. It's meant to fool an attacker. But the way they do things is vastly different. So if we think of honeypots and how they started, initially, it was based on research. You set up a honeypot using something like honeybee, and you pointed it outside. It was tended to be emulated and low interaction. It was really just designed to be a target for attackers to hit so that you knew what was aimed at your network. And again, it's generally, while there were honeypots that were developed and deployed inside, it was generally outbound facing. Now, deception is completely different in the sense that it's not aimed at the outside. So what you're talking about true deception or distributed deception platforms is that first and foremost, they're deployed inside the network. They're really meant to catch attackers that have gotten past your perimeter. So yes, you can do that with a standard honeypot, but there's a lot of disadvantages to doing that. A honeypot has to be live. It has to be on the network in some way, shape, or form in order to engage with an attacker. Good modern deception and distributed deception platforms are out of band. So you can't be used as a pivot point to attack the rest of your network the way you can with a honeypot. So honeypots handle the network side of deception, but there are very few standard open source tools that allow for credential deception. And as Carolyn mentioned earlier, credentials are one of the key ways that attackers can use to not only access your network, but elevate privileges and move around to cause more damage or escalate their attack. Now, old honeypots, again, were emulated. Good deception uses real operating systems and services, because the more that the decoy can interact with an attacker, the more that it presents an attacker to exploit, the longer the attacker is going to be involved and engaged with the deception, and the more information the network defenders can gain as to the tactics, techniques, and procedures, as well as the tools and other IOCs that could be developed based on that attacker engagement. And then going beyond that, honeypots tend to be very static. Once you set it, it pretty much stays there. Modern deception platforms can engage dynamically. They can deploy where an attacker is moving around, even if you don't have a decoy there in the first place. And because of the way deception platforms are designed, they're easy to operate, they're centrally managed, and there's built-in alerting. So that with a honeypot, you have to watch it all the time. You have to keep your eye on it, you have to record, and then you have to manually go over that recording to see what happened so that you can extract any kind of useful information. With a deception platform, all of that is automated for you. But not only that, it goes a step beyond in that you can actually do incident response automation with that as well. Because it's not alerting you until there's an engagement, and because of the no false positive or very, very low false positive rate, the high fidelity of the alerting and the substantiated alerts, you can actually automate your responses based on an alert triggered by a deception platform. And then beyond all that, honeypots are one and done. You need a separate honeypot for each VLAN that you're going to deploy if you want to monitor it internally. If you're going to set it out externally, sure, that's fine. That's what they're designed for. But if you want to talk about globally scaling and projecting your deception across every part of your network, from your cloud to your data centers, to your user VLANs, to your specialty networks, your medical device networks, and other things like that, you need a platform that can deploy across all of that. It goes well beyond what a standard, simple honeypot can do.
Right, so let's go on. So I think what Joseph was able to outline is that there's been tremendous advancement in deception technology and platforms, and this really leads us to myth number 4, which is all deception is created equal. And in reality, the solutions vary widely based upon how comprehensive they are, how authentic they're built to be, and what other things come included, like attack analysis, integrations for incident response, et cetera. What we're also seeing is a lot of times people are starting to put features of deception into their solutions, and there's a pretty dramatic difference between a deception feature in a product versus one that's a full, what's classed as a distributed deception platform, which is the area that Attivo solutions fall into. And so let's take a little bit of a closer look at how to categorize and how to look at these things as you evaluate deception. And we do have a deception evaluation checklist that's on our website, along with some blogs and other information that you are more than welcome to take a look at, or contact your account team if you would like them to dig that up for you. So the first is really the depth of deception, and some people will call this flexibility. And that really falls into, you don't know where the attack is going to be. It may come in at the endpoint, but it's going to move laterally. They may already be inside the network. And so with the distributed deception platform, an enterprise-grade solution is going to give you deceptions at the network, the endpoint, to offer application and data deceptions. There are several players that are out in the market that will promote only a network or an endpoint level, but by doing that, there's a lot of different attack types that you're going to miss, like a man-in-the-middle attack, amongst other things, that are just not going to get picked up with only one type of solution. So again, take a look at the breadth and depth that you see there. Authenticity, as Joseph outlined around a honeypot, there are many deception players that are still trying to promote low interaction and emulated environments, and our belief is that today's sophisticated attacker is going to see through that very quickly. There's even tools out there today that they can run against them and quickly be able to identify these emulated environments. And so the approach that Attivo takes with an enterprise-grade solution is that you're using real operating systems, application services. They can be customized to the environment in which they're in, so they can look identical to the production assets. They're high interaction, and they're dynamically deployed, which really means that it's going to use machine learning to learn the environment and dynamically deploy so that either as hygiene, or if you're concerned you're under attack, or maybe a decoy has been hit and you want to respin it and you want to avoid fingerprinting, that technology is all built in, but it's also built in an automated way that it doesn't take manual work to be able to maintain it. It's going to learn and it's going to refresh on itself or on your command when you want to make the synthetic network change. The evolving attack surface, again, it's going to continue to change over time, more devices, more technology, more movement to the cloud, and the solution needs to be flexible to be able to scale wherever your business is and ensure deception wherever your employees may go or wherever your organization may operate, and when it connects to suppliers or lets contractors in. And so ease of operations is a big one. We are a firm believer that you do not need to look for signatures. The solution should not be agentless. Or they should be agentless and not rely on having to put anything out at the endpoint, because we do understand that there's a heavy overhead already there, and a lot of thought has to be considered around what you might put on there. So these are just little lightweight scripts that will put the deception credentials out onto the network, very easily maintained. You can deploy them through software. You can integrate them with a endpoint solution like a McAfee or a Forescout solution, and deploy it as part of that. And then there are other options as well. But the point here is that however you want to deploy, that there is an option for flexible deployment with that, and you're not forced into one deployment methodology. Attack threat and malware analysis. Does the company have full sandbox and forensic reporting, or is it passing off information to other organizations? Because there's a lot that can get lost. Sharing data is good, but if you can actually have high interaction, you can analyze the attack, you can open up communications with command and control to pick up new commands activities. It's going to give you much richer reporting. You'll be able to run the full forensics on it, and again, be able to make sure that you've stopped the attack but also eradicated it from the network. NH-ISAC, the whole premise of it is around incident sharing and strengthening overall defenses, and we believe very adamantly in that as well. And so we have done extensive work in building integrations which automate blocking, quarantine, and threat hunting. We have several of these, quite an extensive list actually, that exist today, but generally if there's something that you have that's not on our list within 60, 90 days just to get it through QA, we can add to that. So we have all the major vendors that we work with today, and we offer those automations and also some playbook automation for folks that want to go to that next level as well. So you may want to think about that. How important is it taking that manual work for attack analysis and responding to the threat, or would you prefer to have something that takes that out and gives you the information that you need, but again, does it in an automatic way? The other area is also around attack simulation and threat analysis. So this is to understand the vulnerabilities of your network, but also the vulnerabilities of your deception environment. Will that vendor give you the tools to make sure that you can see what the attacker is going to see if they're looking for deception in your environment, and also help you understand things like attack replay, where did the attacker go, what did they do, what are the vulnerable attack paths that they use to move laterally. So really looking at it and going, is it a feature in the environment, is it something that is going to scale to your environment, and is it built for the test of time? Our attackers are getting much more sophisticated, and so falling for an emulated static environment is not something that they will do, and so building something that keeps you one step ahead of the attacker is critical. So some of the things to think about as you evaluate deception, and you'll see that there's quite a vast difference in the technology, although many will hang their shingle on the word deception.
So if you think about what deception is designed to do, everything is monitored in that environment. And because everything is monitored and recorded in the engagement environment, the deception platform captures all the content at all levels of that system, whether it's disk, memory, or network. Now, ideally, that platform, that solution should be able to collect all of those forensic artifacts and provide them to you. But not only that, it has to give you a way to do it easily to capture ephemeral information that's normally in memory. So that's useful if it's just in your engagement environment, but it's even more useful if you can also do it at the attacker endpoint, which is what Attivo's Deception is designed to do. Now, anything that happens, because we're recording everything, we can assemble the full tactics, techniques, and procedures of the engagement and report it, put it out. This includes things like changing attack signatures, polymorphic attacks. We can provide all of the information regarding the attack, as well as IOCs for the use for things beyond the engagement environment, such as command and control servers, the files that are dropped, the changes in registry, the IPs that they engage with. And then we can output all this into your existing tools, your SIMs, so that you can do analysis. But we also provide you the correlated information about the event so that you can do attack analysis internally as well. Now, all of this is useful in and of itself, but we also automate that with third-party integrations to share data and to help you contain the threat, whether it's at the network level or at the endpoint level. And additionally, because of the type of information we can provide, we can orchestrate and assist in threat hunting, provide you the SHA-1 hash that you can do an enterprise search across your entire environment with several different types of tools so that you can identify other systems that were hit with the same type of malware. And then taking a step beyond that, we are developing counterintelligence that you can then use to not only deny access to information gathering tools that the attacker is using, but you can also misinform and deceive them by seeding fake data in your fake databases that you can put in your decoy servers, to even finding out if a document was stolen, where it was opened, the IP address and the geolocation of that system as it beacons home. Now, that type of information is really essential for you to use to provide to law enforcement for investigations. And then because there are certain other entities that that are customers of ours that can go beyond that and are legally allowed to do so, you can also help with law enforcement, and that type of information is good for law enforcement and military action as well. So taken as a whole, the platform end-to-end can give you the type of information you need to help investigate, contain, and eradicate threats that have already gotten past your environment. And you do that through this high interactive deception that makes the attacker think that they're on a live system. So overall, the breadth and depth of information that deception can give you can go well beyond what your existing solutions can.
All right. So great. So a lot of information there about the different feature functionality of deception technology, and we encourage you as you start to look at it to run it through paces and make sure that you understand all of the things that deception can bring to the table, in addition to not just only the detection, but also an improving incident response. So let's get on to myth number 5. Modern-day threat actors are too smart to fall for deception, and very simple. It's a question, guys, does this really work? They're pretty smart, and can't they just avoid being detected by Attivo? And we talked a little bit before about deception and the keys being authenticity, wrapped by attractiveness, and the ability to refresh for keeping the environment new to the attacker and for avoiding fingerprinting. So what you see here is a mix of the different operating systems, services, applications that we provide to our organizations, plus the flexibility to load with their own custom software. So if you have an environment that is very tailored, and you go, the attacker's going to look at this, and unless I load only just my software, they're going to know it's not the same. And so this gives the flexibility to be able to do that. The second thing is really around the attractiveness and building out those breadcrumbs and lures, combined with that deception campaign, proposals, and the automated refresh behind it. And so this really creates an environment where the attacker cannot distinguish what is real and what is fake, and therefore they just need to make one mistake. The minute that they touch the deception asset, they attempt to use the stolen credentials, they try to engage with one of those map drives, it's going to reveal that there's something in the network that you need to pay attention to, and it gives you the opportunity to know early and quickly respond to that. The other thing that we do is we put Attivo to the test, right? So we're willing to say, okay, you test it and try it, and we've been out at several capture the flag events and let people try to see if they can discover deception. And we've also been in numerous instances where pen testers have taken a run at our deception environment in order to be able to identify whether it's a real production asset or something fake. And so really nice quote here from, this is a major pen testing organization, and this person's response was, from an environment perspective, looking at it from the network and Active Directory, everything looked legitimate. And we didn't really talk a whole lot about some of the Active Directory integrations, but there are things that we do, unlike other suppliers, that integrate with Active Directory so that it can validate that those credentials that we put out there appear real to the attacker. Continuing the quote, that's where most people will be coming from. It's likely they won't be able to decipher what is real and what is not, like I couldn't. So this particular pen tester was in the environment for about a week. They were basically building their intelligence and looking at how they wanted to plan their attack, and the same day that they launched their attack, they tricked and we caught them. And so, yeah, they basically stopped at that point, but they thought they had done a lot of work to figure out how to get in and move around undetected, and it was pretty fast game over. We caught them very early, which again is one of the key value props of deception technology. So what I want to do now is transition as we're going to go into some of the healthcare case studies which validate the value of deception technology. And so with that, why don't we have Joseph, you start with the first one.
Sure. So keeping the theme of pen testing, we had a prospect who was interested in doing a red team test, a penetration test, as part of their compliance requirements, because they had to annually run a pen test or a red team test against their environment to ensure that it meets the security standards that are mandated for them as a healthcare organization. And so they decided that they wanted to install the bot sync in preparation for this pen test. And this included deception at the network layer and at the endpoint, where they created credentials that would be seated at the endpoints, and then they let the pen testers go at it. And within a matter of a few hours from starting the initial pen test, the attacker, the pen tester, compromised an endpoint and then found those credentials and stole them and followed them into the deception environment. Now, thinking that they were real, and so he engaged with the decoys because, again, he thought that it was an entirely real system. And as a result, the prospect passed their resiliency test, their security evaluation with flying colors, because not only were they able to identify the target system that the attacker used, but they were able to identify the TTPs and all of the information they needed to catch the penetration tester, identify the actual production systems that they had compromised, and show how they could respond to that attack very quickly. So there was a lot of useful information that they gathered out of that, and it was all because the deception was in the environment to trip up the attacker in the first place.
Great. All right, let's go on to our next way of busting that myth that deception does not add value to the security infrastructure or the security controls. So this one is where a customer was seeing, the skin healthcare customer was seeing SMB share connection requests. It was coming in from multiple endpoints. They were originally suspicious that the events were caused by the BotSync Alliance and not related to their production environment. However, when they investigated this further, the customer revealed that an IT administrator had deliberately compromised about 20 production endpoints. The individual reconfigured these settings to gain control of the endpoint and then used them as zombies to perform reconnaissance of the network. And so, you know, again, very early and accurate accurate detection of this insider doing something that they shouldn't. The administrator was able to gain control of the systems without any other security control, reporting on the compromise. Don't really know what the ultimate goal of the insider was, but they did have the proper legitimate credentials and were able to compromise these systems without being detected. So again, this credential theft is very difficult, and the value of Attivo's solution was to be able to detect this insider threat movement and also to be able to detect this credential attempt to use credentials. Let's go on to the next one here.
Okay, so again, this was another prospect. This is not a customer at the time. They were very concerned that they didn't have enough visibility into their east-west traffic. Now, most organizations can handle north-south very easily, but between systems inside east-west traffic, between the data center and the user VLAN, that's harder to do. And there aren't a lot of very efficient ways to do it outside of deception. So this prospect was conducting the proof of concept using our boxing solution, and they noticed some weird activity from a system on an IP address that they couldn't find any records of it inside their administration systems. So it was an unregistered system. It wasn't part of their Active Directory in any way, shape, or form. There wasn't anything on LDAP. There was nothing in their asset management database. But it was making this activity, and so they didn't know what it was. And so they did an investigation, tried to find the system, and it ended up that there was an XP workstation that was installed at a remote hospital location. So it wasn't at the main hospital. It was at one of the smaller clinics outside, and it wasn't on the same VLAN as any of the engagement servers that they had laid out as part of their POC. But what they noticed was that it was generating weird activity, and so they took it offline to do an investigation, and we haven't heard any other further analysis from them, but the fact that they were able to identify an unregistered system on their environment doing weird activity and generating weird traffic was enough to prove to them the value that the deception solution could give them that type of east-west visibility that they sorely lacked, because the system had been on there in their environment for a long time before they installed the boxing. So it was clear that Attivo was uniquely positioned and uniquely able to find this unregistered XP workstation at a remote site when none of their other systems could for however long it was installed.
All right. So let's go on to the next one here. So this is an identification of a non-compliant partner. And in this scenario, the customer noticed that suspicious logs are being generated from the partner vendor IP address via VPN connection. These logs indicated repeated Microsoft Windows logon attempts to a Linux engagement server. And this would happen every 2.5 hours or so using the same legitimate production username. And so the customer asked us to review some of the captures and provide some guidance on what they were seeing and whether it was malicious activity or something else. So as we helped them review the PCAP files and provide the summary of the opportunity, we were able to identify activity that a partner had been doing that they were not explicitly told to do. So our ability to report on this activity, provide the customer with the forensic data, gave them the ability to quiz the partner before the partner had a chance to do something and cause additional damage. So again, in the insider threats, suppliers, contractors, many times they do have some form of access into the networks, and this gives you the visibility when they're in places in the network or doing things that they shouldn't be doing. It's actually a kind of a running joke with some of our customers as well, where the CISO knows and looks at the dashboard and sees this information, and even sometimes will quiz their own team and go, hey, well, I noticed you guys were doing something, and they're like, how do you know that? And so deception can also provide some interesting visibility to things like that as well.
So now it gets us to the last point, which is malware. Now everyone thinks, oh, malware, I've got antivirus, that's good enough. It really isn't, and so this customer installed our boxing solution because they were afraid that they didn't have enough visibility and protection for their patient data, particularly against vectors, because they've been hit with ransomware before, or they've been hit with other malware that they knew that had bypassed the AV solution completely. So shortly after install, multiple engagement servers, multiple decoys reported a lot of port scans and SNMP gets, which is a messaging protocol that's used to report on statuses of devices. And so they checked the suspected endpoints and thought that perhaps there was malware on there that would account for this. And further analysis indicated that there were several accounting workstations that were probably compromised with an unknown strain of malware that had no signatures at the time. And the fact that Attivo was able to capture the port scans and provide the details of the scans and the types of content involved allowed the organization to quickly respond and isolate them before the initial activity progressed to the point of a serious attack. And that's one of the key things about deception is that it will alert you early in the attack cycle before things get too serious, so you can at least stop it before it gets to the point where you've got a full-blown breach. Now, in this instance, this malware did not have any signatures whatsoever, so Attivo proved its value immediately.
Excellent. Well, this has been hopefully a power-packed session for you, and in summary, we hope you walk away with a better understanding of the myths and realities associated with deception technology, and that it is an extremely efficient and early method for detecting threats that are inside the network that have a tendency to bypass other security controls. Some of the value of deception that our customers have seen, and also Attivo differentiation, and also how to do your own review and assessment on the different forms of deception and deception technology platforms. So some of the key takeaways that I hope you've been able to gain today is if you don't accurately know what is in your network, deception is, we'll say, the answer, because it is very accurate and efficient. We close that detection deficit for you. All deception platforms are not created equal, so please do your research. And then Attivo is globally customer and pen test proven on our authenticity, our scalability, and the ability to provide comprehensive deception. And so, again, I want to thank everyone for joining. I know we do have several questions that have come through. I'm not sure which one to start with, so I do want to keep this webinar limited to an hour. So any questions that we did receive, we will reach out directly to you and make sure that we answer those for you. We encourage you to keep the dialogue and conversation going, so please feel free to reach out to us at info or sales at Attivo Networks, and we would be happy to set up more time, or feel free to reach out to your local account executive. We want to thank everyone for attending and hope you have a wonderful day.